Hello, everybody, and welcome to today's webinar. I'm personally super excited for today's webinar. We're waiting for a few more people to enter the webinar right now, but we'll just go through a couple of house rules. So please make sure that you've muted your mics, no talking over each other. We really want you to ask questions, so please use the chat feature. Any questions you have, just pop them in. At the end of the webinar, we're going to be doing a Q&A. So we would really like it. So the more that you can participate, the better. You've got a team of amazing experts on this webinar. So please ask as many questions as you have. They're here. You've got them for a full hour to ask any questions that you have. So it's mute your mics, use the chat, and just enjoy the webinar. So yeah, like I mentioned, I'm super excited. We've got Andy Acton from Frank Taylor Associates. We've got Murray Welsh from Anglian Dental, and then we've got our very own Saba Arif. They're going to be talking today about squat practices. They're going to be going through everything you need to know to build and establish a flourishing squat practice. And you've got expert advice. So just enjoy the webinar. Have a good time. Make sure you ask as many questions as you can. And first up today, we've got Andy Acton. So for those of you who may not know, I'm sure you do, does a lot within the dental industry. He's always on podcast, he's got webinars himself. Andy Acton, he's from Frank Taylor Associates. He's got 20 years of experience in the dental industry. He's a partner and director of Frank Taylor, and throughout his career, Andy's worked with a wide range of dental professionals within the industry. So over to Andy.
Thank you very much. Right, let me just share my screen so we can get started. Right, so hopefully that's come through and you can see that.
We can.
Brilliant. So good evening, everybody. You've got me for 15 minutes and I'm going to talk about the important things you need to know about if you're going to build your dream, which is your dream dental practice. So let's get started. So to start with, this is a lady called Anna Wintour, and Anna Wintour is the editor of Vogue and has been for decades. But what she says is people respond well to those who are sure of what they want. If you're looking to establish a squat dental practice, I would urge you to deeply think about what it is you want and make sure you're clear about why you're doing it, how you're going to go about it, because what Anna Wintour says is spot on, and people want to follow people who are very clear about what they want and how they're going to go about it. If you can't articulate clearly what your dream is, it's going to be very hard for people to follow your vision and have the same passion that you're going to have. So I'd really take Anna's words to mind. Something else that's really important as well when you're looking to either start up or buy a business is how you approach things. And there's two kind of ways that you can look at it. A lady called Carol Dweck wrote the book called Mindset, and this is her take on it. And a fixed mindset are people who avoid challenges and give up easily and ignore feedback. By virtue of you being on this webinar tonight, you're probably unlikely to be in this category. However, if you see some of these traits in yourself, it's not necessarily an awful thing. You just need to be aware of them, because they might actually limit your ability to flourish and have that successful dental practice you want. And so you just might need to come up with mechanisms as to how you can manage those elements of you. This is the growth mindset, and this is where most of the people sitting here listening tonight are going to be. These are people who embrace challenges. They look for opportunities and they look to grow. Setting up a dental practice is not an easy thing to do. I've helped a number of people do it. I've watched lots of people. I've talked to lots of people that have done it. And lots of people say it's one of the hardest things they've done. So don't underestimate what it's going to require of you to get through that process and grow and build that dental practice. A squat is not an easy way into ownership. And there are other ways that you can do it. But by all accounts, it is one of the most fulfilling things you can do. You start with a blank piece of paper and you end up with this dream practice. But just bear in mind that there are two sides to your mindset. There's a fixed mindset and there's a growth mindset. And the more you can tap into those growth mindset behaviors, the more fulfilling and the more easier that journey is going to be. So I thought it'd be quite useful just to explain what a practice valuation is, because whilst you're right at the beginning, you want to understand how to create a squat dental practice. A big part of owning and running a dental practice is the exit. And you should always be thinking about the exit. I was speaking to two dentists at the dentistry show last week, and they haven't even opened their practice yet, but they were still talking to me about, so how do we exit? What does the exit look like? What things do we need to do to make sure that we exit well? So the things that are going to influence that value of your practice is it's the gross fees. How are those gross fees made up? Is it NHS? Is it private? Is it plan-based? So the mixture of those gross fees is going to have a big bearing on that goodwill value. The multiple of profits. So this is the multiple, which is the number that's applied to your profits. The multiple of profits is going to be the thing that's going to drive the value of your dental practice. And that's going to be set by the valuer. But so you don't control the multiple, but what you will control is the profitability of your dental practice. The type of dentistry you do is going to have a big bearing on your valuation as well. So by type of dentistry, I mean, are you a general dentist? Are you a specialist perio practice? Are you an orthodontic practice? So the type of dentistry is important, because that's going to have the upper and lower limit of who's going to be interested in your practice. So for example, if it was exclusively a periodontal practice, the audience for that is relatively small. However, it's a very profitable side of dentistry. If you have a general dental practice, that's going to have large appeal, but wouldn't necessarily be as profitable as a specialist practice. So the type of dentistry is going to influence the value of your practice. And arguably one of the most important things that sets the upper and lower limit of the value of your practice is location. So if you're at a stage where you're thinking about setting up a squat dental practice, the location of your practice is going to drive the upper and lower limit. And location comes in different guises. So location might be the southeast of England. And then you might say, well, okay, now we go down to Hertfordshire. And then we say, well, do you want to be in a village or in a town? Do you want to be near a train station? Each time you kind of zoom in on that location, it has a bearing on the value of your dental practice. So you can generate your income in a number of ways. You can be a private practice, you can deliver general dentistry, and this is kind of fee per item, pay-as-you-go type dentistry. You can be a specialist practice. I mentioned you could be a perio practice, an endo practice, implants. There's a number of specialties out there. The majority of practices tend to be general practices. If you're looking to set up a squat specialist practice, ideally you've already got a strong referral network in place at the moment, so that those referring practices start to refer from you from day one, and then you're off and running. You've then got plan-based income, Den plan, DPAS, practice plan by that. There's a number of them out there. What a plan does for you is provide regular cash flow. So during COVID, when practices were shut, the people that had plan-based income did really well, because they continued to receive their direct debit payments coming through into their accounts. And then the last section would be NHS income. As a squat practice, tendering for a new contract is going to be pretty hard. There aren't many new areas that are looking to issue new NHS contracts. So just check that out before. If you found an area, speak to your local area team and see whether there is an opportunity for an NHS contract, because that's quite a difficult way to start. If you can find one and that gives you the ability to start a squat, then amazing news. The core costs that you're looking at within the practice, typically, and this isn't applied to everywhere, because depending on where you are in the country, it could be higher or lower. But typically, you're looking at property being in about 10% of your overall turnover. That's typically where it's going to be. Materials are going to be in the region of 5 to 8%. Again, this is of turnover. And laboratory bills are going to, again, be between 5 and 10%. They will vary depending on the sort of dentistry you do. So, for example, if you were doing, say, a lot of clear aligners, your lab bills will be much higher. So you need to bear that in mind. Your employed staff is going to be in the region of about 20%. For some practices, that is starting to creep up now, because there's pressure to pay teams more money. On the associate side of things, where on the NHS, associates were being paid somewhere between £10 and £12 a UDA. We'd routinely seen that now at the sort of £13 to £15 per UDA. Staff costs for some practices now sort of 22%. I have seen them up as high as 25%. the costs in your business that are adjustable, that are going to impact the profit, but also the underlying reconstituted net profit, and ones to keep an eye on, because this is kind of hidden profit in your practice. This would be your motor costs, you may be able to allow a use of home in your business. There'll be depreciation, amortization, and the other ones listed. I only put those up there because it's worth bearing in mind that when you establish a dental practice, these are costs that may well appear in your profit and loss, but they don't necessarily directly relate to the efficient running of a dental practice. So they're items that you benefit from as a practice owner, but they are flexible and they're adjustable, and you can introduce those or not, depending on the profitability in your business. In the early days, when you've just started, there probably won't be much profit in the business, so you probably won't be able to introduce those costs too early. As that practice starts to grow and you've reduced profitability, one of the things you want to do is ideally reduce your profit to as low as is reasonably possible, because you'll pay tax on your profit. And those are some of the items that are going to be able to feature in your accounts to reduce the profitability. On associate fees, as a startup practice, it may be that you're not reliant or dependent on associates in the early days, because you as a lead clinician would look to deliver virtually all of the dentistry yourself to start with. So in terms of understanding a practice value is the multiple that I've mentioned, and that's multiplied by a number. And the number that it's applied by is, to start with, let's keep it simple and work to EBITDA. So EBITDA is earnings, that's profit before, and then you add back to your profit interest, tax, depreciation, and amortization. That's what gets you to your EBITDA number. So your net profit would be £100,000. If you're operating in a limited company capacity, you could add back your tax, which is 15,000. There might be some loan interest in there of 20,000 and depreciation. So you would end up with an EBITDA figure of 140,000. But there's something important to remember, that because you're owning the business and you want to get that profit down as low as possible, ideally, there will be costs going through your business that you can add back as well. And that's going to give us a reconstituted net profit figure. So on top of that EBITDA figure of 140,000, you can add motor costs. And you might have gone on a course in New York, and there might be a pension contribution. So what you end up with is an actual reconstituted net profit figure of 163,500. But it's important to recognize this number, because this is the number that your valuation is going to be based on. And we're going to come back to the beginning in a second in terms of how you fund your squat. But it's always exciting to see what the possibilities are of your practice as it starts to grow and as it starts to move forward. Before we get to the business side of things, as somebody who's setting up a squat practice, or if you're looking to buy a practice, don't underestimate the importance of yourself. And that will get represented in your CV. So if you don't have a CV at the moment, start to build your CV. And yes, there's going to be the clinical side of what you've done, but start to really build into that CV things that you're building experience on the business side of things. And on the business side of things, it might be, you might be involved in a practice where you're helping with some of the marketing. You might be involved in social media. You may deputize for the principal when they go on holiday and help out some team issues. You may do some training. But if you're starting to build some business skills and experience, get those recorded in your CV. Because when you go to a bank and you might need to raise finance to help get your squat off the ground or to buy a practice, they're going to be really interested in you and what you've done. And sometimes if we don't record it ongoing, we kind of lose sight of the things that we're doing. So just bear in mind that what you've done is really important. Get it captured in your CV. What you also need to do is record your assets and liabilities. Assets are things that you own, liabilities are loans. Typically, an asset might be a property you might own. A liability might be a short-term liability, might be a credit card, or it might be your mortgage. But try and get a sense of what things you own and what things you owe, and that will give you your net worth. But again, a simple asset and liability statement is a good thing to build, because a bank is going to ask to see that. And they're also going to ask to see what your income and expenditure statement is. And this is effectively what you earn and what you spend. In a perfect world, there's a positive number left at the end. But what that means is that you earn more than you spend. And what you're really saying to the bank is you're in control of your finances. You can manage your personal finances. Therefore, you can trust me to manage my business finances. That's the reason that you're showing that to the bank. So how do you fund a squat practice? You can do it in a number of ways. You may have your own cash. You may have been working hard as an associate. You may have built up your own cash and you can use that. It may be that you've got access to some family cash. Again, happens quite a lot. A great way to get into practice ownership, whether it's a squat or you're buying a practice. You may be able to leverage other assets. And by leverage other assets, it might be if you own a property, your home, and your home is worth £500,000 and you have a £100,000 mortgage, you might be able to remortgage your property and release some equity from that property. You can go to a bank and you can get a commercial loan from a bank. A squat practice is not as attractive as an established practice because there's no track record. Therefore, banks typically up to about 50% of the investment of the total project. They're keen to support you. Above that, it gets harder, which is why the cash and the leverage in the other assets is important. You can also use asset finance, and I'm sure Murray will talk about this from his side of things as well, but you can actually get people that will provide finance for the equipment, fixtures and fittings in the practice, the chair package, the cabinetry. So you don't need to fund it all from a bank loan. You can actually get some asset finance. And what some people have done is they've also got an investor. So they might get somebody that joins them in the business who's perhaps not clinical, and they just join them to put money into the business because it's a good investment, because dental practices are good investments. So when you go to the bank, you need to present to the bank a business plan, and you can get a template off Google, really straightforward, and you need to present a cash flow forecast. If anybody does want a cash flow forecast, just let me have your details and I can send you a template and you can fill that in yourself and just play around with it and see what those numbers look like. But you can build that yourself over time. And this here is really, how do you see it? How do you feel about it? Do you see opportunity is nowhere? Or do you see opportunity is now here? And that goes back to the beginning. It's all about mindset. And if you've got the right mindset, you'll be on the path and it will be an amazing experience. That's me. Thank you very much indeed. I'm going to be sticking around all night. So yeah, if there's questions later on, feel free to drop them into the chat and we'll pick those up in the end. And I'll now stop sharing, hopefully, and it should be back with you. Might just take a second to come back to you.
Thank you so much, Andy. That was really, really, really good. I definitely feel like I've got a growth mindset. I want to open a practice and I'm not even in a position to do so, but it's definitely giving us food for thought, for sure. So next up, we've got Murray Welsh from Anglian Dental. Anglian Dental, leading dental suppliers, over 30 years experience. I always recommend Anglian to anybody that's asking me where do they get their equipment from, what should they do. I've used them at practices I've worked in, so I'm really looking forward to hearing all about what Murray's got to say today. So Murray, take it away.
Thank you, Victoria. I'll just set up my screen share. Is that coming through?
Yeah, brilliant.
Excellent. Thank you very much. And thanks, Andy. Oh, still on? Cool. Good stuff. Sorry. Zoom quit unexpectedly. That's bear with me.
We lost you there for a second, Murray.
Sorry, right, I think we're back on now. Good stuff. Right, I'll just try
Hey.
again. Sorry about that. Okay, is that coming through?
Yeah, all good.
Wonderful. Good. Apologies for some IT issues there. Thank you very much for inviting me on. I'm Murray from Anglian Dental and very excited to be on tonight. Use this chance to try and educate and provide some advice from our experiences in helping lots of dentists to set up squat practices. So I'll just start off by a brief intro on who we are as Anglian. So if you don't know Anglian Dental, we're a family-run business. We're set up by my granddad in Winchmore Hill in North London 30 odd years ago. And we've been in the dental space ever since. Grandpa actually started as an engineer, so a dental equipment maintenance man going around fixing things from his van and his garage, and slowly grew the business. Early 2000s, started out into the more maintenance and equipment side, selling new equipment, cabinetry, dental chairs, etc. And then fast forward another 10, 15 years, and we started doing more of the design and the building works. And the Anglian Dental of today, we're pleased to have a significant sized team, and we have a full in-house service for projects. It's not just squats, but it is a large portion of what we do. It's the design, the build, equip, and maintain. And I thought I'd try and go through the stages of setting up a squat practice, just to sort of help educate and explain what the correct process would be, how you can expect to see the project unfold. It's been great what Andy's saying. There's a lot of background, your mindset and the business plan. And we usually get involved once the project's a bit further down the line and it's starting to take shape, and you've got a site, or you're looking at sites and you're wanting to realize the dream. And that's where we can assist. And I'll run through now the process that we would work through, which hopefully is come up on the screen here. So there's lots of ways of breaking a project. We like to keep things simple, and we break it down into 3 different stages. So design, build, and equip or fit out. So within each of these 3 stages, there's lots to consider, but as a company, and our recommendation is always to be very process driven and use checklists, use people who've done this before, use the experience, because it's a huge undertaking. But by following a set process, you get the same result. So same inputs, same result. So the process that we work to is shown on the screen here. And I'll just briefly fly through it, not to go into too much detail on it, but it does vary from project to project. But in general, rule of thumb, we'd start off with a feasibility, which is looking at where it's going to be located, how big it is, how many surgeries you can get in, and what the budget is. This is a very important stage, one of the most important stages of the design, because it's fundamental to get a practice in the right location at the right budget. And to assist this, we can provide a general arrangement drawing, which will show some of those later, and a banking budget, which is a very simple Excel sheet, which we can share a template of if anyone's interested. And it's a list of everything you'll need to set up your squat practice, right from the design through to the building works, the equipment, the cabinetry, CBCT equipment. And it allows you to fill in a spreadsheet saying how many rooms you want, what size you want, and gives you a rough indication of where the costs are likely to be, which you can then take that to a bank, to your financer, and say, look, this is the plan. Here's a banking budget. This is where I think I will be on my costs. Once that's approved and the business plan is full steam ahead, we then look at the layouts of the practice, get the building surveyed, start the technical design. There's quite a bit of compliance, which Sab will talk more on later, with regards to building control, CQC, things like radiation protection, making sure it complies with disabled access. These are all critical parts which come down to the design. So it's very important to have the right expertise at this stage once you're designing your practice. Interior design is something which we then move on to looking at the finishes and the visuals of the practice. Once the design's finished, and it's very important to spend good time on design, because if a project is well designed, it's half done. Project well designed, project's half done. And it's much easier to implement a build project when there's accurate design. So you know where every socket's going to be, where every light fitting is going to be, where every computer is going to be, where all the X-ray machines are going to be located, where the lead lining is. There's literally hundreds of pieces of data you need to consider when setting up a squat. But by designing it out and making all the decisions up front before you start will mean your build will go quicker, be smoother, there'll be less problems on site, you'll have less variation costs, and you'll be a lot less stressed. Once the build is underway, it's important that clear communication is established. So we would always set up a rhythm of regular site meetings, put a project management team in place, provide a point of contact, set up a schedule so that we agree before the project starts, start date and the finish date. And it's quite important to be quite clear about that. I think any project you're going into like this, where it's time sensitive, often have agreed lease free periods with landlords. You've got things like CQC visits booked. It's very important there's an agreed start and finish. And any project you go into, you don't want to be going into it until you can be absolutely sure that come hell or high water, there's a finish date agreed. Once move towards the end of the project, there's the equipment and the fit outside, which is all about choosing and placing your dental equipment, your cabinetry designs. And there's a lot to consider here with technicalities, and it's well worth partnering with a trusted engineer, trusted advisor who knows the technical of dental equipment. Things like how many rooms you're going to fit out to start off with, planning out additional rooms in future. We'll talk more about that in a second. All very important. Plus things like lead times for equipment. They are coming down recently, but we've just come off the back of a period where waiting 9 to 12 months for a dental chair has not been uncommon. And planning that in, knowing in advance, doing the showroom visits early on is very key, part of the choosing the equipment process. I thought I'd just spend some time just looking at some case studies, which might be beneficial. We get asked the same questions a lot when we're setting up squats, and we love it. And we thought we'd try and answer those questions by looking at some real life case studies. So I picked up 3 case studies of some squat practices we were involved in and set up in the last 12 to 18 months, and run through the project just to give a brief oversight and a brief introduction into how the project ran and what a squat practice looks like. So this is a project we did in Marston Mortain, just across the road from where Dr. Captain Tom Moore, was it, who did laps to raise all that incredible money for the NHS, just literally across the road from where he did it. So this is a lovely squat practice in Bedfordshire, and here's some photos. And here we have just a brief summary of the project. So it was a very compact building. It was a new build. It was around 700 square feet, and it was an empty shell when they took it on. So literally just 4 walls, brand new build, so very simple. And the resulting impact was a very straightforward squat. The costs were relatively low. It was a simple project. Weren't any issues in terms of uncovering the unknowns, and it happened relatively quick. So we've got the specs here on the screen. As you can see, 2 surgery practice. 1 surgery was fitted out initially with space for and plumbing for a second room, and the practice is going very well. They've just actually ordered the second surgery, just about 12 months in from opening. Project duration was 10 weeks, and total approx cost of around 200 grand plus VAT. The next project I wanted to look at is more of a higher end project, which is perhaps a bit more designer led, perhaps a bit higher end, with again two surgeries. This is in the heart of London, and it's in Westminster really. This was slightly more complicated because it wasn't a new build, it was an existing unit, which we had to do quite a bit of refurbishment works. There's a lot of rip out that went on. And within a refurbishment, you often come across the unknowns. So when you take up the floors, when you start knocking things around, you'll come across unknowns. And that is something to bear in mind when you're looking at a location, looking at a unit. The more you can see, the barer it is, the less there is in there at the moment, the better it is from a fit out point of view. It's important to check for services, your drainage, your water, your power supply, but as a general rule of thumb, once your location is confirmed, i.e. the location of the unit, if it's a good footfall, etc., looking at the internals of the building and the simplicity of it will have quite an impact to the fit out costs. So we can see here the use of crystal glass, feature lighting, gives it a real edge. The specs on this practice, slightly larger than the previous one, but not slightly unusual shape. Included CBCT and 2 surgeries, a slightly longer project duration. Our last case study is Hertfordshire Dental Group, which is a very large squat in Hertford, very lovely practice. Built to a good spec. This was an old shop. It did come with some challenges. It was an old building, wasn't listed, but it was quite old, and lots of removals and rip outs needed. Ceilings had to come down. The building itself was rather old, and that does come with its challenges with regards to the services that have been run, the power supplies, the network points, the frontage, and it therefore did take longer, cost more. This practice was very well designed. We were delighted to be involved in the interior design, used a lot of wood and natural finishes, a lot of good lighting, and it really has created a wonderful space for the practice, including the use of glass to lots of natural light throughout the practice. 2 surgeries initially, and they've ordered the 3rd surgery, so that's being fitted. So I think it's already been fitted, actually, 3 rooms now. Here we have the specs for this practice. Now, I just wanted to spare a moment just to look at the plan here, because this is what we referred to earlier as a general arrangement. So quite early on, I'd recommend getting a floor plan of your practice or your proposed practice and doing the layouts, playing around with some drawings, something we can help with, something anyone who understands dental design, looking at an ergonomic design for the practice. This will form the basis of any estimates, any business plan, any technical plans, and getting a practice well laid out is absolutely essential for ensuring it's compliant, it's ergonomic, and it flows well. So we can see here, there's a large practice, 2,500 square foot on the ground floor, 4 surgeries, 3 fitted out initially, and lots of squat practices to it. Thoroughly recommend it. Plumb it for as many as you can, get it ready. Don't necessarily need to fit the equipment though. The equipment's expensive, it's a high investment. You don't need to do it right from day one, and it's a great way of spreading out your cash exposure in those early days where you need good working capital to get the doors open those first few months. If you can lay off on the equipment in some of the rooms, it's well worth it. It's important it's planned out and considered right early on. As Andy mentioned earlier, equipment financing is very popular. And just a word on that, we're not a finance broker, couldn't claim to understand it all, but it's well worth talking to an expert in this field, because a lot of the time they can take the equipment and cabinetry package as your asset, and then part of the building works as well can sometimes be included in that package to finance as much as possible. You want to be financing, every situation is different. We'd always recommend speak to an expert, but finance as much as possible so you can spread out payments across a longer term and save any savings or any cash, hard cash, for where it's most needed. Project duration here was over 3 months, and most squats would fall somewhere between the, say, 10 to 14 weeks in terms of project duration. This was slightly longer than usual due to some of the complexities. Good spec, and the total cost there of 600k plus VAT. As you can see, there's a huge variance in costs. One of the biggest questions we get asked is how long and what does it cost? And the biggest influence on cost isn't the spec, it's generally the site you take on, the size, the shape, the works involved. So if someone's wanting to do a project on a real tight budget, my advice is really try and find the best site. By that we mean it's got to be a great location, but find a site which needs minimal impact in terms of building works, in terms of design, because that will really reduce the fit out costs. That's basically it from me. Hope it's been informative and helpful. Thank you very much for the opportunity, and I'll hand back to Victoria.
Thank you, Murray, and cheers for that. I think you've answered so many questions, because a lot of the time it is how long is it going to take, how much is it going to cost, and you definitely covered that. So that's so helpful for lots of people that are looking to open up a squat practice. Next up, we have our very own Saba Arif today from Smart Dental Compliance. She has over 10 years experience in compliance. She's set up lots and lots of squat practices. She helps you from A to Z. I'm excited to hear what she's got to say. I love working with her. And yeah, over to you, Saba.
Thank you so much, Vicky. So how are you guys, everyone? We're like half an hour into the webinar. So I hope you're still all awake, and you've had some really insightful information from Andy and lovely Murray. So we have structured the webinar in a way where Andy can talk about finance, and then Murray can talk about the equipment. And then last but not least, I will talk about CQC compliance, because it's one of the most important aspects when it comes to building your squat. And a lot of the dentists, especially if you're opening a squat the first time, you're not going to be trained in university or in your 5-year degrees, like, you know, in terms of the compliance, policies, procedures, what you're supposed to have in place. And to be honest, it's like a jungle. There's so much to it. You wouldn't realize until you really get into it. So there's like loads of policies, loads of procedures. The application process is quite long as well. A lot of the time we get clients coming to us and say, oh, Saba, by the way, we're only 1 week away from opening and we need to submit application. And I'm just like, whoa, you know, you've left it a bit late. So my slides are all going to be when to submit your application, what application to submit, what supporting documents you guys need. So let me share my lovely slide with you guys. There we go. Right, so I hope you could see this. There we go. Perfect. I've got a thumbs up from Victoria, so hopefully my slides are showing. So compliance for squat practice, leave the stress of compliance to us and build your dream practice. So some of the key points that I'll be covering are why is compliance one of the most important aspects of opening the practice, how to prepare for your registered manager interview, and what are the CQC requirements, Victoria has very nicely summed up a bit about myself, but I'm the Senior Compliance Consultant at Smart Dental Compliance in training, have been here for 6 years. We have at Smart Dental successfully opened 89 dental squats. Me and Victoria actually had to spend 2 hours calculating how many squats we've opened because we've just totally forgotten about it. But we've done about 89 squat practices in the last 6 years, and touch wood, we've had 100% pass rate for all of them. So we're really, really lucky and really honored to, share this information with you guys. In terms of the CQC compliance journey, what it looks like, as soon as you find your location and you sign your contract or you sign your lease, you get the keys, give us a call straight away. We will book an initial site visit with you just to come and have a look at the site. Again, you would have, your equipment and the architect and the design, but we can have a look at it from a compliance point of view. So how much space you would need for a decontamination room. And I will share some case stories with you guys as well. There was a practice I recently went to in Milton Keynes, and they were opening literally 10 surgeries, and their decon room was the size of, those toilets you get under the stairs, I think about that size. And I said to her, where's the decon? And she goes, it's the decon. And I said, you do know that you've got 11 surgeries, so you would approximately need at least 3 autoclaves. So how are you going to fit it all in here? And she goes, oh, Saba, I never thought about that. So it's things like that that we pick up when we come out to do the initial site visit. The other thing would be like submission of the CQC application. So depending on if you're opening your second practice or if you're opening your brand new squat practice, we would know what applications you guys need to submit and what information needs to go on the application form alongside with your supporting documents. CQC review your application and the supporting documents. You get an inspector who's allocated to you. And then we do another site visit in order to prepare you for the registered manager interview. Now, this one is like, crazy. Everybody gets nervous when it comes to the registered manager interview. And this is where we come in and we try to prep you all the way till your registered manager interview. A lot of people ask, like, should we start doing it straight away? I usually give it 2 weeks before the actual interview because people get so nervous, they tend to forget everything. And then when it's the day of the interview, they were like, oh, I don't remember, I went through that question. So that's in terms of the registered manager interview. And then last but not least, everything goes well and you're opening the dental practice. Now, the whole process, I just need to warn you, does take a lot of time. So we are looking sometimes between 12 to 18 weeks even. Sometimes it can be quicker. It just depends what the backlog is with the CQC. So if they've got a massive backlog, then you are looking at 18 weeks. If they haven't got a massive backlog, then it can be quicker. It just all depends on the CQC. We can't guarantee anything. So what do we need to get ready? Before you apply, you will need to be clear about the application you are making. Understand the requirements of legislation, be able to explain how you will follow the regulations. So you do need to do a bit of research. And what we do as part of our Squat Practice package, we give out a lot of resources to our clients. So for example, the Health and Social Care Act, that's one of the most important care act that you will get interviewed about at the CQC manager interview. So we will give you some free resources that you can read and just equip yourself of what is coming up. The next thing that we do as part of our Squat Practice package is we allocate you compliance consultant who you would have access to. I was going to say 24/7, but I'm not going to say that because I do get people messaging me 3 or 4 in the morning. So you do have them like 5 days a week, even on the weekend sometimes. So you can get in touch with them to ask them any questions, book Zoom meetings to get some more information. The next is you must have specific pieces of information ready. So when you are ready to apply for your CQC application and we're ready to submit your CQC application, you need to make sure that you have all the information. What does that mean? That means that you need to have your countersigned DBS. Now, there's a bit of contradictory information with the CQC. They're constantly changing it. Sometimes they say that if you are registered with the GDC and you have been with the GDC for 12 months, you don't need the countersigned DBS from the post office. But if you're not, for example, if you're a practice manager, then you do need a countersigned DBS. So we will always check that for you. That's another good thing. When you go out to do the application yourself, you might not come across these things that CQC have changed the regulation, or what has CQC done recently? So again, having that compliance support from a company like us will actually take you, you know, there will be hopefully no hiccups and it will be a smooth ride for you guys. Supporting documents. A lot of people ask, so what do we need in order to submit the application? So what we do is we sit down with our clients and we book Zoom sessions to go through all the supporting documents that are required in order to submit the application. So yes, we do fill out the application with your support or with our client support, and then we will give you a list of all the policies and the procedures that we would need, any employment history, governance document. Now, this is one of the most tedious tasks because there is a lot of documents that we do require in order to submit for the CQC. However, if you do get these documents and they are all organized in a folder and we send it off, it's only going to save you guys time from the CQC going back and forth. So that's another like really important aspect that we do sit down with our client and discuss, is getting all your information ready. Sometimes it does take about 3 to 4 weeks to get all the paperwork ready, but once it's ready and it's ready to submit, then you can breathe, have a nice cup of tea, go on a holiday. No, I'm joking. Don't go on a holiday, please, because CQC do come back to us and they do say that, oh, we do need further information or we do need further evidence as well. Okay. So next is the statement of purpose. This is a question we get asked a lot. What is the statement of purpose? Statement of purpose is not rocket science. It's really simple. CQC do provide us with templates, and we use the templates to fill out what's your business, what are the aims, what are the objectives, what are the places where you would provide the service, who would be the registered manager, name and address of the registered manager as well. So this part is not as difficult as people make it sound like. It is pretty straightforward. We hold your hand in every step. So whether it's chasing up the CQC, another question we get asked a lot is, can you fast track our application? Sorry, we're not a passport service where you can pay that extra £100 and 2 weeks fast track your application and you're all done. I wish I could do that. But unfortunately, I can't do that. They do have their timeframes, but what we can do for you is we can chase up the CQC and find out in the queue where your CQC application is, just to give you a bit of peace of mind that has it been forwarded to the registration manager? Have you had an inspector allocated to you? So we can do that for you. Call the CQC registration manager, review all your documents, and we can check your site. So as I said, we do come outside and do a site visit to make sure that the site is fully ready as well. Because as part of the registered manager interview, one of the things that the CQC will check is your site. And a lot of the people leave that right till the end. They just forget about it. They think, oh my God, the registered manager interview, what questions am I going to get asked? What's going to happen? But at the end of the day, they do check the site as well. So we do need to make sure that the site is ready. I'll talk a bit about registered manager interview, even though I've got about 4 minutes left. But it is very important. You do need to prepare yourself with the registered manager interview. You do need to do your CPDs and get as much knowledge as possible. So things about safeguarding policies and procedures, mental capacity, GILIC competency. These are the key terms that the CQC will ask you. So make sure you know what they are and you're ready to answer those questions and you're ready to give example. So the first part of the registered manager interview is usually 1 hour. And this is where they will go through the whole site. So they will do a site visit to make sure that you guys have got your signages. The site is absolutely safe. One of the other things that people tend to forget is your RPA service, which Mari mentioned. So you need to make sure that you have a RPA consultant. You've had all your risk assessments like the fire, Legionella, health and safety, disability risk assessment. These are very important as well. And you need to have them before you have your registered manager interview. A lot of the time people forget about those because they're so busy finishing the little bits and bobs, but they don't, they forget about all the additional information that the CQC requires. So the first part, as I said, will be having a look at the site physically just to make sure it's all compliant with the CQC. And then the second part is all about registered manager interview, where again, they would ask about you, what your qualifications are, what makes you suitable in order to be a registered manager. I don't like to say it's all common sense because people go, Saba, it's not common sense. Maybe for you it is, but it's not common sense. It can be sometimes a bit daunting, but just talk about yourself, be very natural. You do have managerial skills because in our daily lives, we do manage a lot of things, especially girls, we're multitaskers. No offense to the guys, but you know what I'm trying to say. But talk about all the skills that you guys have. and just be natural and be open and honest with them. If you don't understand anything, just ask them to repeat the question again, and they will give you different type of ways that they will give you examples, and it will come around to it and you'll be fine. But the good thing is we're here to help you prepare for the inspection that is going to come up. I did have a lot more slides, but I'm going to go through it very quickly. So one of the key things: planning permission, design and layout, treatment room specification, decon room, toilet specification, fire safety, signages, documents required for the CQC. Make sure these are some of the signs that you guys have got, like the hand washing sign, local rule, fire signages, health and safety, location of medical emergency drugs. Some do's and don'ts: register on company house, apply for your DBS as soon as possible, get your employment history on order, and ensure that you have all the registration, like the building registration, HSC, ICO, all of that is all in place. So I know it might sound like there's a lot of things, and yes, you know, when it comes to compliance and opening a squat practice, they are a lot of things. And this is why at Smart Dental Compliance and Training, we have created a bespoke squat practice package, which will make sure that you don't have to worry about compliance. So you can concentrate on building your dream practice. You can have the interior the way you want it. You can get your finance sorted out, whatever you want, whether it's equipment, whether it's the little bits and bobs, and we will take care of the compliance. So what that basically means, we'll make sure your site is ready. We have got in-house amazing risk assessors who will come out. They will do your fire, Legionella, disability, health and safety risk assessment on the same day. We've also partnered up with the RPA company, so we will sort out all the RPA paperwork for you. The IOM system is one of the fastest growing compliance system at the moment within the market. And we were at the dentistry show and had nearly like 20 signups on the day, which was absolutely amazing. Because the system just is so simple to use. It gives you compliance, CPD courses, HR management, stock control, and lab management all under one. I mean, managing a new practice is really daunting. So to have a good compliance system from day one is very important. Number one, it will help you save time so you can do as much marketing as you want and concentrate on building a dream team. We also actually do like team training as well. And we can also help in staff recruitment, because recruitment is crazy at the moment, especially when you're building a squat. You hire fast and you fire fast. That's what they always say. So having a helping hand when it comes to staff recruitment can be really helpful. So that's our squat practice package that we do. As I said, we've successfully opened 89 squat practices, and we do a lot of squat practices. If you go to our YouTube channel, again, we'll share the link. We have shared some very, very good success stories with some of our clients who we've helped to open the squat practice. And they've had amazing experience, and we've really thoroughly enjoyed helping squat. It's something that I'm very passionate about myself, alongside with Victoria. We both deal with squat practices a lot. So yeah, if you guys are planning to open a squat and you don't know much about compliance or you need a helping hand, give us a call. We're more than happy to help you. We'll be there all throughout the journey for you. So yeah. Thank you, Victoria. That's all from my end. Thank you guys for listening to me.
Thank you so much, Saba. Amazing as always. So let me just share my screen with you guys. So, I mean, I don't know about everybody else for this webinar, but I found that so helpful. And the amount of answers to questions that I hear every day, every time I do like a consultation with a new squat client, you've kind of answered pretty much everything that I get asked. So it's like really, really helpful. I'll definitely be just sending everybody over to this link to save me having to relay any of this information. So I found it super, super useful. We are doing a bit of a Q&A. So we have asked some people that are on the webinar to submit questions prior to today. If you do have any questions, obviously you've just had a lot of information. You might have some questions based on what you've heard today. You might need some help. Maybe you're opening a practice and you need a bit of guidance. Please do use this webinar to get the answers. It's not very often that you get 3 experts, 1 webinar, absolutely free of charge, all the advice you can get. So please do ask any questions. So some of the questions that I have been asked during the past few weeks, the main ones were, I think this one's mainly for you, Andy, I'm not sure, but it says, what is the timeline for approval and funding? So that's one of the questions that I got, and that's based on kind of getting funds together, I'm guessing from the broker or yourselves, and how long does that process take? And when should people start thinking about that?
So it very much depends how you go about it. If you're going to use a broker, you go to a broker once, and then a broker will probably go to 3 banks, 4 banks on your behalf. So if you use a broker, it's going to be quicker because you only need to supply the information once. If you're going to do it yourself and not use a broker, you need to assemble the information, and then you need to ideally go to 3 or 4 banks, but you'll need to deal with each of them individually. Let's assume that people are going to use a broker. The timeline that's unknown is how quickly you can prepare the information. And so what you're going to need to have together is your business plan, and you're going to need your cash flow forecast. So Murray was talking about producing a project plan, which is going to have costings in there. That's going to be so helpful to run alongside your business plan to make sure that that can form part of the overall proposal. So those 2 things are going to go hand in hand. Producing the cash flow forecast is going to really happen once you've identified your site, because you're then going to know what size it is, what your utilities are going to cost, how many people you're going to need, what your staff costs are going to be. So let's get to a stage where you've got all the information together and you can start having a conversation with a broker or go to a bank. It typically takes somewhere between 4 to 6 weeks to get credit sign off on an application, something in that order. Once that's been signed off, that's effectively the bank saying, we will lend you the money, and then there'll be some conditions to be met. But you're looking at about 4 to 6 weeks, and then you're probably looking at about something like a month to prepare your proposal to a point where it can be presented to the banks. So you're looking at something in the order of 2 months. I would say the sooner you can start the process, the better. As a rule of thumb, slowing finance down is easier than speeding it up because you have no control over the bank. The other side of it is, bear in mind that if a bank offers you finance, that doesn't last forever. And it's probably going to have a time limitation of a maximum of 6 months before those funds are going to be used. So what I say is don't start too early, but start early enough, because the reality is if you don't get the loan approved, that may limit your ability to do the project. So you need to get an indication quite early on that the bank is going to support you.
Amazing. Thank you so much, Andy. Another question that we've been asked is, would you still recommend that people go like the squat option, or what are your thoughts on taking over like a pre-existing NHS contract? What are you seeing in the market? Obviously, you're doing this day in, day out. You're working with a lot of dental professionals.
A lot of it comes down to appetite to risk, to be honest. A squat is more risky than buying an established practice, only because you've got existing patient base, existing revenue, existing profit. And there's a rule of thumb, the logic that says if you keep doing what's been done, you should probably get similar results. So it may not be the perfect practice, it may not be in the ideal area, it may not have the patient mix and the treatment mix that you'd like, but there is a safety in taking over a practice that's established. The downside to that is you pay a handsome goodwill price because you're paying for the work that somebody else has done. If you have quite a healthy appetite to risk and you manage it well, and going back to what Murray said about use systems, use processes, get it well structured, you can set up a squat. You guys have done it. You guys have supported, I think Sabacel 89 squats in 6 years. It can be done, but just don't underestimate it's hard work. It's cheaper than buying an established dental practice, but you saw the investment costs that Murray showed in terms of the fit out and the kitting. What you also need to factor into that as well is some working capital as well. And that's a fancy phrase for an overdraft, because it may well take you somewhere in the order of 9 to 12 months to break even with your squat. And during that period, you're going to be burning cash until you start to build that patient base. So a lot of it comes down to what do you want. If you buy an established practice, it's unlikely going to be your dream practice. If you set up a squat, it will be. But a squat is a bit more risky.
Amazing. Thank you so much, Andy. That's great. Again, if you've got any questions, you've got Andy for about another 10 minutes. We'll pop them in the chat. I'll move over to this one, Saba. It's kind of aimed at you, I would say. So a client said to us, or somebody that's on the webinar, they said, I was not aware that I need to have had risk assessments prior to my interview, and the company that I used for my application didn't advise. Please, can you clarify what risk assessments I should have done?
So yeah, risk assessments are extremely important because they will tell you, for example, the fire risk assessment will give, CQC an assurance that the building is fire safe. Then you've got the Legionella risk assessment just to make sure that there's no Legionella in the water pipes. We've got health and safety to make sure like all the standards have been followed for health and safety. And last but not least, we've got the disability risk assessment. The disability one is a bit difficult one nowadays because a lot of the practices don't have space for a disabled toilet. So they often ask us, we don't have a space for disabled toilet, so we're not disabled friendly. I mean, there's nothing wrong that if your practice is not disabled friendly, it's not like the CQC are going to fail you for an inspection. So if you do not have a space for a disabled toilet, obviously you still would need to inform the CQC that we are not a disabled friendly practice. However, we've got a buddying practice, which might be, let's say, 1 mile radius or 2 mile radius, or you might have like Tesco's or Sainsbury's or Asda, and they might have a disabled toilet. So again, you can point your patients towards there saying that, you know, there is a disabled toilet within 2 to 3 miles radius, which you can use. However, within our practice, we do not have a disabled toilet. So disability one is a big one that a lot of practices are missing at the moment. So yeah, these are the 4 risk assessments that you—
Amazing. Thank you, Saba. One for you, Murray, is opening 3 surgeries simultaneously can be a substantial financial commitment. Would you advise that I stagger, or is it best to set up all the surgeries at the same time? What's most cost effective?
Thank you. Yeah, it's a good point. Certainly would recommend, if possible, to stagger the setup. It's quite right. The equipment within a surgery, it's quite an investment, you know, 25 grand upwards really for all the equipment you need, a suction pump, compressor, X-ray chair, cabinets, etc. for one surgery. So if you can stagger it, then definitely worth doing that. Lots of Scots would, but what is important, and something of advice for those looking to start a squat, is plan out the whole practice right from day one as if it was fully fitted out. And that comes down to detail of planning all the surgeries, which chair you're going to have, where your X-ray is going to be, where the computer is going to be, the layout of the cabinetry, because a lot of the services that will be run in, so when you've got your floors up, when you're running your services in, you want to run to the exact point, and different chairs, different X-rays have different service requirements. So it's quite key to do your research up front, know what you're going to have, so that when you're doing the fit out, running the pipe book in, I mean, it's not going to cost much more at all. In fact, it'll cost much less to do it as part of the build project than try and do it later on. So run the services in, but do spend the time to plan out exactly what those rooms are, how those rooms are going to be laid out. Hope that helps.
Amazing, thank you so much. So Andy, you mentioned that you had a cash flow template. Murray, I think you said that you had something that might help people as well. And Saba, I know you've got the shit hot guide to opening up the squat practice. So if anybody does need any copies or anything, any help whatsoever, please reach out to us. We're here to help, and obviously it's going to help you guys. So if you do want copies of anything, reach out to us. Thank you so much, all 3 of you, for today. I know you've got busy lives, you're all so busy, so I know taking time out today to join us, like, I really appreciate it. I know it's been helpful for me. I'm sure everybody on the call has loved it. It will be recorded, it will go up on YouTube, we'll share it on all of our platforms, so anybody that's missed it, again, anybody that's watching it, it's already been on. Any questions, just reach out to us. But yeah, thank you so much, you've all done amazing, and yeah, thanks so much, guys.
Thank you, Victoria.
Lovely. Cheers, Victoria. Thank you very much.
Take care, everybody.
Thanks, Andy. Thanks, Murray. Thank you, everyone, for joining. Have a good evening.
Take care.
Cheers.
Bye.
Bye.